So, hello everyone. Welcome to our session today. And we want to walk you through today our field experience reflecting the value of choosing open and staying open, where we were part of a customer journey moving from the incumbent existing OpenShift platform to a Rancher platform. I'll join you today, myself, Ahmed Shawki, pre-sales engineer in MENA region, and with myself, my colleague, Juan.
Hello. Hello, I'm Juan Herrera. I'm working on the technical marketing team.
So, how was that journey and when it actually started? So, I do recall that specific customer call where we received that in Jan 2020 after completing the Rancher acquisition with SUSE. And like when we had like the team preparation for that meeting, we're kind of having like quite surprising facts for us. One is that this is a kind of a financial institution, entity or enterprise. And to be honest, SUSE, in terms of the before Rancher, in terms of operating system regarding core banking application, was not there at or reaching those customers. So that's one thing. We also know that he is a very big Red Hat customer, big in terms of scale and investment. The third one was like we knew that those guys are an early adopter of OpenShift platform, so they are really in the region acting as an innovation leader, bringing containerized workloads to like core banking applications, and they were going actually at scale. So we had to put our heads together in the team, trying to understand what's the target, what's the expectation of the meeting, how the we are already in a competitive scenario or situation, so how we would address that. So it took us a lot of time to like prepare for that meeting, but it is still remember. I do remember each and every part of that meeting. It's kind of was a quite experience for us. So we actually started with them trying to understand the objective of the meeting, and they wanted to understand why Rancher could be a unique proposal. Technically, I believe they have evaluated the solution. They have done their study very well. Their technical team knows about SUSE Rancher and the acquisition and all of it. So we try to focus with them about how the Rancher way of taking this cloud native workload was unique in the market. And the first one was a multi cluster scenario. So by that time, Rancher, with its native multi-cluster management capability, was kind of unique in the market against the other kind of monolithic cluster approaches that was there in the market that time. And it was very obvious for us that we focused our value in the management as a kind of a making Kubernetes not only our Kubernetes, but any CNCF certified Kubernetes consumable into enterprises with the sort of controls, securities, policies that you can apply. And one key differentiator that we kind of spent some time explaining or discussing was our kind of disruptive open source approach in the community, where we offer our software completely free. Like all the features are there within Rancher, the community. And it was kind of surprising for them that the fact we are just maintaining a single version of the software, which is on GitHub, where our community users as well as our enterprise customers are using. There is no any feature heading for a paid version or whatever. All the updates are also published and consumable by the community. We understand and we are very proud with the reach that we had in the community, the adoption. We actually crossed more than 100 million downloads with I believe we're crossing also 55,000 active deployments in the field between our community as well as enterprise customers. So those were kind of big value points. And when we also addressed like what's your future map, roadmap on taking Kubernetes or cloud native workloads. They also expressed that since they are going at scale, they are also considering kind of local service provider in the region. So allowing them to manage other Kubernetes distribution was a kind of a key plus for them. And that was our value to them of staying open, allowing you, customer, to explore what makes sense for you, what adds value to your environment, and so on. And then we walked through kind of a lower level where we actually discussed what is it that Rancher provide. So it was very clear for them that our focus on the management of the multi-cluster, multi-site, even multi-cloud approach that Rancher provide as a kind of a central control plane for your Kubernetes, as like the SUSE websites and all our material says, Kubernetes, anywhere, simple. So we can support you today in your on-prem, uh, in your data center where your like core applications are running, and in your future moves also. We actually have in the region quite investment from the cloud providers. So we have local data centers from Azure, from AWS, and from Google, like regionally. So this also gave us an advantage to our customer to understand and relate to our multi-cloud full lifecycle management capability, which is unique as of today. One also major value of staying open for that customer, since they have existing Red Hat skills, investments, knowledge, assets, all of that. They also appreciated us offering them that they can use Red Hat as the underlying operating system for Rancher to be on top of. So there is no kind of special learning, or we don't sell them kind of a green stack, but they also appreciated that we would leverage their existing skills, investment setups, and then build on top of that, giving them the flexibility that they were looking for. So, as you can see in the control plane, we address a lot of key components in terms of authentication from an enterprise component, like let's say Active Directory or Okta or any SAML provider, how our solid role-based access control can be used to leverage a kind of container as a service or cluster as a service approach, where we use our project concept to give different teams, different application, kind of logical segregation using projects namespaces, or like a higher level of isolation with cluster isolation, where teams and applications can leverage that. With this role based access control, they can offer that and maintain this flexibility as well as control that we can in place. The other part was about the full life cycle management capability for our own distribution as well as the cloud provider distribution. And we also allowing them to incorporate and manage any CNCF certified distribution as well, considering that you would have later on an application provider that comes with a sort of opinionated Kubernetes distribution. So we avoid having extra silos in the environment. And that was kind of our open way to allow our customer to scale on their cloud native journey. Yeah, so this is basically a very interesting slide. I personally learned a lot from the customer conversation that time, and they also appreciated our open approach. So in this slide, we discussed with them about how our mission and with SUSE Rancher is to unlock the ecosystem, the cloud native foundation ecosystem, not only our stack or like the kind of traditional software certification method, but we actually ask our customer and encourage them to go out there and pick up the right tools in the cloud native landscape that makes value for them, and we are happy to integrate and support. So the integration list here is not an exclusive list. This is just kind of examples that we typically see in the field. And the fact that they actually told us an issue that they have with their existing OpenShift, which also highlight a downside of having a very opinionated, vertically integrated stack. So I do recall they were trying to have a newer version of Prometheus and Grafana to be updated or deployed on their OpenShift. And I think the Red Hat support for OpenShift mentioned to them that this could invalidate the platform support in general, which they have seen a very limiting factor on their ability to innovate, to bring tools that they would like to use and customize on their own. So we spent quite some time here explaining that our platform could be more of a Lego approach, that you can integrate and build and replace components, and we're happy to support you even for anything that works with Kubernetes. We are happy to offer and take the first support call and offer kind of root cause analysis and integration support with our platform. Also, the fact that we are offering a container D option, I believe they have seen kind of some limiting options with Creo from the existing solution. So having Container D was a kind of a very good option for them, especially with K3S. And we also showed them that we are working with some of our customers in banking industry on their digital transformation and digital banking experience, where they are leveraging our lightweight Kubernetes distribution K3S. And like as the relation progressed, they actually started to look later and evaluate Harvester, which is our open source hyper converged infrastructure solution. And the target now, we are speaking to the cloud native applications team as well as the infrastructure team, and their mutual target is to be open and have a sort of a centralized API driven data center infrastructure and application, all of that managed with Kubernetes itself. And I believe also, Juan, you had an experience of trying to change Prometheus and Grafana from existing OpenShift that you also can walk us through.
I think you explained it pretty well. The point is that, as you said, OpenShift offers an opinionated approach with a stack that bundles a lot of components. Some of them are built by Red Hat, so they are open source, but are not common in the community. And some others, to be able to fit on that model, needs to be customized somehow. So that's Prometheus and Grafana is a really good example. In fact, because in one of those migration projects, we have been involved. Okay, for example, you want to integrate an external Prometheus and Grafana when you deploy the custom resource object collide with the existing ones, okay, with our modified. So as you described, that's a clear example of things that you cannot do. And removing the Prometheus and Grafana provided by OpenShift is not possible. Okay, so that's a factor that really limits. Okay. And for some customers, having a closed stack may have a value, but in terms of freedom, are playing with, as you said, building your own Lego, giving the customer architects all the tools they may need to build their solution, sometimes it can be quite challenging.
Thank you for sharing that. And all those technical values were also kind of part of their evaluation. And since they were going to take cloud native at scale for their like business and core application, the costing factor of that scale was very important, which we will see on the next slide, how we were different and help our customer to scale with their cloud native journey. So the fact that SUSE Rancher offers our subscription model based on a node based subscription, and a node for us is any compute instance, being physical or virtual. The size is irrelevant, like the number of CPUs or vCPUs, that's irrelevant. So that was kind of a very important factor for also their business team to take that decision and invest on the transformation journey, because as they want to scale and grow their platform, they have seen that with Rancher they can have that scale with a managed cost approach. And we also kind of shared with them existing field studies from other customers who has taken this journey, how they managed to save in terms of not only operational excellence but also from financial perspective as well. That was a very key differentiation for them, because they were expecting huge change in the pricing when they go at scale with OpenShift, especially that they were into the OpenShift 3 to 4 migration, which not only incur the subscription cost, but also the migration costs kind of you gonna involve like Red Hat to deploy the new platform and then do the migration, which is also where quite hectic cost for their journey moving forward. So with that, we kind of give them an overview about the technical value as well as the business and commercial value of staying open on supporting their cloud native journey at scale moving forward with their in their financial market. That's it from my side, and I will now hand over to Juan to walk us through the next part.
Okay, thank you, Ahmed. So, as Ahmed said, when we have been involved in these customer discussions, on top of the product view and the business view that Ahmed shared with them and the value they see there, we also, from the services side, I was working a consultant at that time, we tried to explain to the customer how the migration process may look like, because this is really important as they need, obviously, in a customer migrating needs to make sure that what is working now is going to work on the target platform, so business is not impacted. So we are going to describe a little bit how that process works. And for that, it's important starting comparing how both stacks look like. On the right side, we have what may be the Red Hat provider stack around OpenShift, and on the left side, what Rancher provide in terms of technology stack around Kubernetes. You may see there are some difference. At the end of the day, we are comparing things that are similar. Okay, they are not that different. We are offering Kubernetes, but there are big changes in the way we deliver that Kubernetes. So as you can see on the right, OpenShift approach mixes is opinionated, so it mixes the operating system layer, the Kubernetes layer, plus some services. As we were saying before, that creates a bundle and that cannot be modified. So customers should be okay with that approach. And that base model that, let's see here from, let's say, using the names of the product, which is OpenShift Kubernetes Engine, that's not usually available to customers. So most customers, what they have deployed is an additional layer on top of that, which is OpenShift Container Platform. That is that core opinionated model plus additional components that offer things, for example, integrated log management and some other functionality. So that's something really important when considering what we get when we go to Rancher and how it may impact the migration. On the left side, on the blue side, you will see that we try to keep Kubernetes as standard as possible. And for that, we isolate the Kubernetes distribution from the operating system and from the value-added services. Value-added services, as you may imagine, are log centralized monitoring, maybe service mesh like Istio, those kind of components that are needed by our customers. Doing that, we are also able to work in a more flexible model because we can provide our own Kubernetes distribution with our LKE, LK2, K3 as the ones that Ahmed described, but we can also work in the same way with the most common infrastructure Kubernetes managed service providers are AKS, GKE, all those main players on this space. And that has a lot of value because that way you can create a real multi-cloud approach, or you have the freedom to design that kind of architecture without having to stick to a single provider. So having all that in mind and having a better understanding of how those blocks work, it's important in terms of migration. So that was in terms of a stack, okay? But within the OpenShift stack, what we always speak and describe to customers that they want to migrate is that there are some components that are OpenShift specific, so they are not available in any other place. That is not a big problem in terms of migration, because for each of them, there are components available either on the Rancher side or the community side that can cover all that. And most of the time, it's just doing things in a different way. Here, there are some examples, some commands, okay, that come from, for example, how build pipelines are created or were created back in the days of OpenShift 3. Those are not valid anymore. So customers that were using OpenShift 3 had to re-implement those pipelines. But as we said, most of the time, that meant going to the standard Jenkins way of working. So that was an improvement. So they were migrating and going to a more standard and open approach to deal with those pipelines. So that's usually not an impact. There are some components, for example, in some ways, OpenShift has its own way of creating the containers and distributing the image containers. They have their own way of doing deployments, but all of them have equivalent alternatives on the standard Kubernetes world. In terms of, for example, things like ingress that are really important, OpenShift usually relies on the concept of route that needs physical routers to make them work. But on the standard Kubernetes side, we have the ingress model that is well known, and is what most of the customers are using nowadays, and it's what is widely adopted in the community. And yeah, the idea is that there are differences. There are things that only come on OpenShift that are not, let's say, community adopted. But the good news is that there are open and community accepted alternatives that we can move to. And the migration process is not a big deal. So that's in terms of describing how OpenShift looks like in terms of migration. But anytime we deal with a migration process, we should not forget, never ever forget about the business and the impact on our internal consumers. As Ahmed described, we were approached because customers really wanted to be more flexible in terms of architecture, have more options in terms of where they deploy their infrastructure and how it is deployed. Many times that's come from IT department, and I wanted to achieve those improvements in their infrastructure, but we need to understand also how this platform is being integrated in the whole company, and it's important to understand for that really what we are going to migrate, which is going to be the focus of our migration process. Why? Okay, and that goes to the benefits we are going to expect. And at the end of the day, we need to we identify all the stakeholders within the companies. This is critical. As critical as being able to do a proper design, it's critical to understand the three concepts. I will just focus on the why, because probably it's what we may need, or as technical people, we need to understand and also consider during the migration process, because those whys, okay, are the ones that are going to make the process, the project be successful or not, because we need to make sure that the business understands the motivation for the migration. And Ahmed has already gone through some of them, so we will not go into much detail, but just keep in mind that this is the list of the most typical objectives customers have when they want to migrate. The first one is the most important, is really going to a non-close approach. So what we found on OpenShift is an open source product. It's a good product, but it's an open close model. So once you start working on that opinionated stack, is quite difficult to move away. Okay, so main driver for most of the migration, and it's well understood by the business, is that we want to avoid the locking and being able to work Rancher, hyperscaler, whatever other solution you have. And please keep them in mind, okay, just to try to match with your own motivation. And yeah, don't forget to discuss them with your business, identify your key stakeholder, and have a clear understanding of what you want to migrate, because we have found, for example, some customers in other projects that they are not going to migrate everything. They just want to have dual vendor or have clusters. Ones will be based in OpenShift and some in other platforms, just depending on the type of workload. So now we go to the most important, let's say, phase during the migration process, which is related to the migration design. And the migration design cannot start unless we do a proper infrastructure discovery. Here are the questions or the topics you need to review to have a full list. There's a lot of stuff there, but it's just because we try to make the list as comprehensive as possible. Remember, as we defined at the beginning, that even the platform has some differences. At the end of the day, we're working Kubernetes. So migration in this space are not that difficult. And there's a funny fact here, and that's why we have been involved in the last 2 years in a lot of migration process, is that when OpenShift created OpenShift version 4, and customer had to go from OpenShift version 3 to version 4, they had to do a migration because there was not an in-place upgrade. So most of what we see here is the same. You have to go through the same process when you are moving from OpenShift 3 to moving to OpenShift 4. And that's back in the day what opened the door to consider migration process, because you need to do that exercise, because again, OpenShift 3 and OpenShift 4 only share the name. The platform was quite different, and what really you have on OpenShift 3 was a different approach in terms at that time was available to have a separated operating system and the Kubernetes layer on top of that. There were opinionated stuff like we described at the beginning, but the migration need to go through all this process. So please do not forget to ask those questions, identify those topics, okay, and do the proper migration inventory, okay, all the interdependencies of your current platform. In terms of the strategy, okay, once we have identified the connection points to the rest of the infrastructure and we have deployed our target environment, we need to think about the what we were describing at the beginning, what we are going to migrate and how we are going to migrate. And here we have two main groups of applications. We have the stateless application and the stateful applications. Usually we follow a different approach, a separate approach for both of them. Why? Because by Kubernetes nature, migrating an stateless application is as simple as redeploying somewhere else. That can be a manual redeployment of the target system, and also it can be also just a retargeting of your continuous delivery pipeline. So you have the deployment performed by a CI/CD pipeline, and you want to move an stateless application, just retargeting that pipeline to the new cluster will make the job for you. And in many customers during the migration process, what we have done is have a dual targeting as part of the pipeline. So when we are in the migration phase, applications are targeted to both the original cluster and the target cluster. What we need to be more careful, or what we need to design with more detail, is when and how we are going to migrate stateful workloads. The workload itself needs to be aware of the how the storage is consumed by those applications. So what we do there is define a volume migration strategy, and that strategy may need some downtime. So that should be all the part of the process that we should be planned to do on, let's say, on a maintenance windows. There are several tools available for that in the community. One of them, open source, is Velero. It's a well-known application that is used to do backup and restore of workloads. It covers not only the object definitions, but also the volumes and the content of the volumes. You see an asterisk there when we talk about doing Velero namespace backup. Why we don't like to do full backups from the Velero side? Because OpenShift, I would say, is highly opinionated, so any workload that is present on OpenShift has a lot of annotation levels and code that it's only related to OpenShift. So we recommend not to use Velero to move the object definition, because if we do that, we inherit all those, let's say, metadata that is not relevant anymore. So what we recommend is just migrating the application definition using one of the methods we described in the first two lines, and then do a block storage replication, backup, restore, or asynchronous replication. Velero can do backup restore, and if you happen to have other solution already in your company, like Custom or Works, which are backup solution designed specifically for Kubernetes, they can take care of that replication. Our own Longhorn storage system can be used for that. So another option we have used with some customers, we have deployed Longhorn on both places. We have deployed Longhorn on the source OpenShift platform and Longhorn on the target system, and use an approach where we first change the storage class on our OpenShift cluster, and we move to Longhorn, and then we rely on Longhorn's asynchronous replication to take care of the volume, moving the volume to the target system. So those are the technical aspects of the migration. So we have identified the link of the value to the business, which is the technical approach, and then it's from the consulting side how we do it. Okay, as we described, we obviously go through a discovery process that leads to a design and document. This is an iterative approach, so we start testing and we optimize all those environments. And finally, we create the deployment on the target platform. Here, with some more detail, okay, you can find all the process we follow. Okay, this is a well-established practice within our services organization, and that way you will have a clear understanding of how the process look like. Okay, so it's not just that we feel that our product is able to cover anything you might need during the migration, but also that our services teams can support you with a well-defined procedural approach to the migration process. And last point is that how we do this. It's important to understand the challenges that the customer is facing when they have to migrate platform because of the cost. Okay, they are paying for a platform and they may need to pay for the subscription of the target platform. What we do, okay, is we have a services offering that covers the consulting, the help the customer may need, plus the subscription. So with that consulting offering, while the migration is being done, they don't have to take care of the subscription, because that offering covers the services, okay, the work that our consultant is going to do together with the customer, plus any subscription they may need at that time in an unlimited way. So they have both a consultant supporting the process and our support organization taking care of any issue that they may find. And that's basically, we found that you find this useful.
I also wanted to highlight also your support and the services organization. I remember we had a very important question from the customer about, okay, what if I needed later to migrate from Rancher? And I do recall you answering this. What we built for you is a migration framework that would apply to work from moving you from OpenShift to Rancher. You can also use the same framework to, if you decided to migrate from Rancher to another target platform. And again, that fits with our open approach, that we really give the customer the control of what they want to do, what makes sense for their business, as well as technical targets to achieve. And that was a key value of even our services staying open, and the customer choosing open to go with SUSE on that approach. So thank you, Juan, for the support during that field experience. Thank you for attendance. You have our contact details on the presenter slides, so feel free to reach out to myself or Juan for further clarification, inquiries, or discussions. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.